Well, welcome to the show. My name is Jim Ferguson, and I'm here with Adam Coleman, all the way from New Jersey in the United States of America. Welcome to the show, Adam. It's great to see you. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, been a busy day. But a very, very productive day. I don't know about you. I suspect you're probably the same. I quite like to keep busy.
Oh
But
yeah.
listen, you're the first time guest on the channel. We've got a lot to talk about.
Mhm.
But because you're first time guest, would you be good enough just to say a little bit about who you are, where you're based, what you do, where you're located, that type of thing?
Sure. I always kind of explain myself as being a former IT guy, IT manager turned media commentator. Um, I'm the author of the book Black Victim to Black Victor. Um, I then started writing for different publications. I'm currently the columnist or one of the columnists for Human Events. And I also founded Wrong Speak Publishing, which is a platform where we invite writers, whether they're known, unknown, people who want to submit articles to us and help get published and give them a voice, give a voice to the voiceless, so to speak. Um, and also, I'm a brand ambassador for XXXY, which is a athletic wear company started by Jennifer Say. And I feel like I'm missing other things. I have a lot of I have a lot of jobs that I'm
Well,
a
you're
frequent
also
contributor to the New York Post as well.
right, okay. Because I was gonna ask you about that, but you're also a model too, aren't you?
Yeah, for XXXY.
For XXXY, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, good stuff. All right, so how is things in New Jersey at the moment? I mean, what's the sort of stuff that you're seeing happening in your part of the world? Because I'm always interested to hear what's going on in other areas of the world. What's going on over there with you just now?
It's interesting because I don't live that far from New York City. And where I live at is pretty normal, pretty calm. Um, and New York City is like a whole other world. So even though it might be like to get into Manhattan is probably like a 40-minute drive, but it's like an entirely different experience to go there. And I talk to people who live there frequently. My wife is originally from New York, and until a couple of years ago, she was working in Manhattan. Um, a lot is happening there. There's a lot of decay, um, a lot of things are bubbling to the surface, a lot of mismanagement, things don't make sense, and the immigration issue just compounded the problem.
Right.
Um, and so basically everybody's just getting bussed into New York. All resources are shifting towards the migrants that are here. What makes the problem of COVID kind of fit into this mix is that New York City is a really hotbed for tourism, or at least at one point it's a hotbed for tourism. So you have all these hotels and so forth. Well, when we shut down the economy, there's no tourism. So then you have this opportunity for housing for migrants. So I think it's like, I can't even remember the percentage. I don't want to say half, but a good portion of the hotels, especially within
Wow.
Manhattan, are going towards housing migrants.
Wow.
Is there specifically a contract? You can publicly people can look it up. There's a contract with the hotel lobby in New York City worth, I want to say, is in the billions of dollars to house the migrants. So basically, it just became an opportunity to recoup the money that they had lost, but at the same time, perpetuating a growing problem.
And of course, when you say the migrants, I mean it's not sort of normal migration. It's
Right.
am I right in saying it's mainly illegal migrants that's causing the influx? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I go back and forth with different words because everybody refers to it as different things.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
absolutely
Sure.
right. Like illegal immigration and legal migration, two completely different things. My father was
Mhm.
an immigrant to the country, but he came here legally. And you know, I one of the things I used to say about like the difference between the type of migration that started happening in Europe, I don't know, What year did we start seeing a flood of people coming from the Middle East and North Africa
We
into mainland Europe? How long ago was
well
that?
that happened around about the time that Tony Blair, the UK Prime Minister, sort of got in with Gordon Brown, who took over from him, and that was when a lot of it started. But it did actually start a little bit before that in the 70s. So I would say
Okay.
probably middle to late 60s, 70s, we started to see that happening in quite a significant way.
Because I was thinking about because from the media over here, we had it seen as the migrant crisis, but
Mm-hmm.
happening in the EU when basically Angela Merkel was like,
Oh
"Come
yeah.
on down," and then everything then everything
Oh,
just started flooding through. But I remember when that was going on and all this chaos was happening, and in the years prior, and one of the things used to say, like, yeah, we have illegal immigrants in the U.S. Like we border Mexico. It's a long border, basically a
mm,
desert. And yes, we will always have that. However, it's not as bad, and our migration issues seem to be more vetted
right.
because the people who want to come here really want to come here. Like it's not easy to migrate here. Um, and I thought because of that experience that we don't really have immigration issues. Like we don't have issues with immigrants in that way because it is more controlled. It seemed to be more controlled than what was
Yeah.
happening out in the EU
Yeah.
and basically streaming in through the UK. But
Yeah.
now what's happening is that theory is going out the window because it's kind of a free for all. I think the only thing that doesn't make it as bad is because we are a country that has already a lot of immigrants and immigrant communities. So people kind of go and blend in certain places, or they have family that might already be here. So it's not as bad as it possibly could be,
Yeah.
but it's it's really bad. So much so that people who don't live in border states, because this used to always be framed as, oh, it's just these Republicans who are living in Texas or the border states. That's the border issue. Oh, they're exaggerating. But then when it starts coming to Chicago, New York, and not even just the major cities anymore, like it's
Yeah.
going to the smaller major cities like Denver, Colorado, you
Yeah.
know, they're going all over the place. And now it's becoming
Mm.
everyone's problem, which is a good and bad thing because once you start making it everyone's problem, then there becomes more of an emphasis to fix this problem. But then at the same time, you wonder, is the genie already out of the bottle?
Well, it makes me wonder. I mean, I know I saw it in Denver, Colorado when I was over there. I was over there towards the end of last year. I was across 8 different states from North Dakota down to South Dakota. Then I went
Mm,
to Nebraska. I was all over the place, and then ended up down in Alabama. And but what seems to be happening, Adam, is that this is a problem that every single country is going through in a very strange kind of way. And when I
mhm.
say strange way, what I mean is it's an orchestrated way. I don't think this is happening by chance. Now, I travel around a fair bit. I'm not that long back from the Netherlands. I'm going to be heading back there quite shortly. I'm about to head to Geneva in Switzerland. But I was across in Ireland just about a couple of months ago, and I went there. Some of the people that follow me on the channel said we'd really like you to come across to Ireland, Jim, and see firsthand what's going on. And I went, and I have a connection to Southern Ireland going back a long way, although I am a Scottish Highlander.
Mhm.
Um, but it was interesting, and I saw immigration, illegal immigration, that was quite frankly off the charts, and it sounds like almost in a similar level of what you're talking about in the areas in New York and some of those cities that you're talking about. And I did witness that in Denver, Colorado. I was there for a couple of days before I flew down to Alabama.
Yeah.
And seems to be a coordinated thing going on here. I mean, if you take Europe, France has a massive illegal immigration problem. It is destabilizing the country to the extent that churches are being built down, people are being assaulted. There is such an influx of people that have no cultural identity with that country. It's also happening in Germany. You've talked about Angela Merkel there. You're absolutely right. Germany got
Mhm.
hit really hard. But even places in the sort of the southern hemisphere, places like New Zealand, places like Australia, they've got these massive problems too. And let's not forget Canada. And it's like there is a sort of a coordinated move to push what I would say is massive amounts of illegal immigration for a particular purpose. Now, I mean, at the end of the day, Adam, you and I kind of met each other because we belong to a similar group, Global Freedom Fighters. It sounds very grand, and it's some great people in there, and of course, you and I are in there too. But you made a bit of an announcement, and we're going to come on to that in a moment because it really caught my eye. And then I realized you were following me, and you've got a fantastic channel. You and I, we're going to get all the details up. You're producing some amazing stuff. I've got to be honest with you, and I would highly encourage people to give you a follow and to listen to what you're saying.
Thank you.
But yeah, you're welcome. This illegal immigration is a massive problem, and it's growing. And it's causing a lot of tension. I mean, normal people don't mind people coming in, escaping from a war zone, or if it's women and children. I mean, who would turn your back on people like that? But that's not primarily what we're seeing in the UK, in Ireland, and in Europe, or even in these other countries that I mentioned. It is predominantly young men aged between 25, 35 years old. Mm-hmm. So I don't know about you, Adam, but if I was fleeing a war zone, I'd be taking my closest family members with me, children, and I would never leave them behind. So there's something not right here about all of that. Do you have any thoughts as to what might be going on behind the scenes as to why that might be getting coordinated and what the actual end game might be?
So I think there are multiple motivations. Like it might be, let's say 3 different motivations, but at the end of the day, they want the same outcome. I think one of the motivations that maybe we don't necessarily talk about too much, we'll use Germany as an example because Germany was the loudest, like, come, yes, please come. Yeah. So Germany is facing 2 sort of issues. One of those issues, even though they have the strongest economy in Europe, one of the issues that they have is the aging population. Mm-hmm. Not enough people are having children. So when you have that, you start to have shortages of employment in different areas to sustain the society that you have. So they're facing that particular issue, and they've been facing that for quite some time. I don't think it's as bad as like Japan, but it's their birth rates are below where they should be, let's just say. And then the second problem that they have is, in my opinion, they're overeducated. So what I mean by that is they have free education, quote unquote, free education. So when college education becomes free for all citizens, then college kind of just becomes almost a requirement at that point to getting employment because it's kind of expected. So then let's say, okay, you go through all your primary schools, you go through a university. Now, when you come out of that, do you want to sweep floors? Do you want to pick up the garbage? No, you want a white collar job. You want to do these higher skill jobs, right? Because you did the education. So I do believe that there's an element within the German government that wants a new underclass of people who are in the service industry, of people who are serving the German public in some form or fashion, low skill labor. So they can, on top of that, fulfilling the gaps that they have in employment due to low birth rate, in order to sustain what they have. And I think they're looking at this as a particular model to do so. In the US, I think there is a little bit of that. I want to say it was Nancy Pelosi. I might be mixing up the politician, but there have been a couple of politicians who've indicated something of the same here. Like someone has to do the job. Why not have them do it? Actually, Mayor Eric Adams in New York City recently was basically stating, listen, we have a shortage on lifeguards. Why don't we have some of these people who might be good swimmers? Why don't we have them fulfill the job? And so what he's talking about is, every country has maybe like work visas. Most countries have like work visas, right? It's a process. You have to get the authorization to go through that. And so what he is trying to do is sidestep that and put people in a position to gain employment while being here. And on top of that, getting paid by the city, because these are city positions, getting paid by the city to do this. So like there's so much there's so much illegality that's happening when it comes to this migrant situation. It's like, if you asked me 4 years ago if we'd be in this position, I'm like, no way. But when you see that the New York City government is fighting for non-citizens to be able to vote within the city, and thankfully our court system is like, no, that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. Like, so thankfully, but they lost on appeal. Like they're continuing. The New York City Council is continuing to go down this path. So, and I talked to other people. There are other places that are going through something similar. There is this push to, yeah.
So I was just going to say, just before Ireland, I was interviewing a politician from Ireland. He's standing in the local elections. It's about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days ago. Great interview, good guy. He's really working hard. He's out there doing everything a good political candidate should do. And I wish him every success. His name is Niall McConnell, and he's an independent. And he was telling me that the illegal migrants that are been really flooding into Ireland, I've got to say, into the south there, they are now being allowed to vote in the local elections, but they just have to have proof that they've been living there, could be in a tent for the last 6 months, and they can stand as councillors, as mayors, as, all of that. And a lot of them rip up their, they rip up their passports. They get rid of their documentation before they land into Ireland. And they could be criminals, they could be drug dealers, they could be pedophiles, they could be anything. And yet the Irish government are doing that. They're just letting them come in. And if they want to stand for election, that's what they're doing. And some of them actually are. And the Irish people is not a very big nation. I mean, there are actually about 3 million Irish people, but they're sitting at about 5 million due to the last 3, 4, 5 years of unprecedented illegal immigration coming into their country. So it just reminded me of what you were saying there. I mean, your constitution might not be allowing that, but it looks like they're trying to overturn some of that, aren't they?
Yeah. So I never thought I would say this, but our bureaucracy and our layers of bureaucracy has saved America in many ways in the past 3-4 years. Having the judicial system and many layers of judicial systems involved to prevent tyranny has been like a really big thing. So, for example, OSHA, Joe Biden was trying to force employers to have us all get the vaccine, or else get constant testing. Yeah. And that would have been an extreme hindrance on me, because I was working a full-time job, and my employer is like, we don't want to make you do this, but if this goes through, we may have to, and this is what it's going to look like. They gave me a plan, like this is what I'm going to have to do. And I remember listening to the OSHA arguments and waiting, and I was like, please don't go through, because OSHA doesn't have that capability. Like, he was trying to weaponize the department to do something like this, and it doesn't have that ability to do that. But what if we didn't have the court system to have this entire proceeding to prevent the president from doing something like this? So like there's just been so many moments. Is our court system perfect? Absolutely not. But we have so many layers to our court system. We have the local courts, state courts, federal courts, and going to the Supreme Court, like if need be. So I think our court system has actually saved us more than people want to give some sort of credit to.
It's interesting. I mean, you've got the legislative branch, which is the court systems and all the different layers that you're talking about. And then you've got the president, which is the executive branch. And sometimes they come into conflict, but they are a very powerful body in their own right. And as you say, they've saved the day in many respects. And of course, America, I'm a great fan. I love American people. I really do. And I've got such a passion for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all the different parts of that, because the founding fathers in the United States, they gave it some real good thought, and they came up and
Mhm.
produced something that is really, really good. And in the UK, we have the Magna Carta, and we have all of that as well, but it is slightly different. But when you talk about forced vaccinations, I mean, I'm very much against any kind of forced anything to do with medical procedures, because that
Right.
is in direct contravention of the Nuremberg Code and all of these different types of things. And as we now know, they weren't safe and they weren't effective. Uh, Despite politicians like our Prime Minister here in the UK, Richie Sunak, standing up in Parliament shouting out about it being safe and effective. But what he didn't tell anybody was that in 2017, he'd gone and put in 500 million, $500 million into Moderna, into a company that had never had a successful product, Adam. It makes me wonder what he knew, several years before the pandemic broke. There's a lot of
Yeah.
corruption going on, a lot of corruption, a lot of people trying to make a lot of money, and they are. But at what price, Adam? And that's one of the things that I think, I believe that we do and will face justice at some point, which kind of leads me on to something that you had mentioned in the WhatsApp group that we share, and that
Mhm.
is that you have become a man of faith, or at least you've recently pronounced it. You'd like to tell us a little bit about that? What led you to that? Because it was quite a big step, wasn't it?
Yeah. Um, it there definitely wasn't one thing. It was a series, years of um looking at my life, looking at certain things happening. And I'm very analytical and I try to make sense of things. Um, and when I see, once or twice it's a coincidence, but when I see certain things happening over and over, it makes me think that there may be something more to this. Um, so whether it be someone like in my lowest low, someone was always there to help me and wanted nothing. Um, you know, I've talked about this a couple of times. I've had a couple of supernatural experiences. Um, one is a bit of a long story, but one experience where I the only way to put it is that I felt the Holy Ghost after my grand aunt had passed away, and feeling absolutely terrible because she was like a grandmother to me, feeling terrible for 2 weeks. And I was her pallbearer. And when I put my hand on her casket, I just had this overwhelming sense that she's fine. Like I just knew. And I never cried after that. And like from holding back tears to feeling absolutely fine, like something just took that all away from me. And I had the best time with my family in some years when prior I was contemplating just going home and mourning by myself.
Mm.
Um, and so, I've thought about that moment and what happened, and it's the only thing that makes sense is that it was the Holy Ghost, um, removing that from me, removing that pain and letting me know that she is fine. Because when she passed away, she was in excruciating pain, and she was a good woman. Um, and I had another experience where I felt evil. Um, people like to say that, oh, well, this is normal, it happens all the time. But I remember waking up, it was like 3 in the morning, and it was dark, but it seemed darker than normal. But I knew I was awake and my eyes were open. And I heard something creepily say my name, like in my ear. And it scared the shit out of me. But while I can still hear it to this day. Like I know what that sounded like. I know what it felt like. And it felt evil. Um, and I wasn't dreaming because my dreams, I know when I'm dreaming,
Mhm.
but I was awake and I heard what I heard. And at the time I was agnostic, and someone had told me not that long afterwards, coincidentally, that, I'm vulnerable. and I should pray before I go to bed. And I started doing that, and things got better. Um, so, I look at all of these different things that are happening, even down to writing my book. I didn't go to college. I'm not a writer, or I wasn't a writer at the time. And I had no expectations when I wrote the book. And all these people who reached out, all these people who liked it, who I impacted, who would tell me like, God is with you, unprovoked, which would always like really hit me. And it hit me for a reason. So I just started adding up all these things, and learning more about Christian faith, learning more about Jesus, and just kind of exploring, and started praying more, talking to God more. Um, and so I'm hoping that next month I should be getting baptized.
Wow, that's a big step, and it's interesting. I mean, I am a Christian as well, and I've never made any
Mm,
secret about it. But the supernatural absolutely does exist, and a lot of people sometimes get some odd experiences sometimes, and not every shadow that moves is the demonic, but you get a sense, and you're right. And of course, these things can be they can be around depending on lots of different circumstances. And the power of prayer is incredibly
mm,
powerful. And I can tell you, I know for a fact that is incredibly powerful. I share the fact that I've had some odd experiences in my life. And a long time ago, I used to be very interested in the other side, as it were, the sort of the
mm,
darker side. And I think it can suck you in because there is an air of mystique to it. There is an air of mystery to it, the hidden, the occult, that type of thing. But thankfully, I only ever read about it. I never actually got involved in it.
mm,
But it's a very real power that's there. The problem is that it's a very dark power, and I think what we're witnessing. I don't know how you think about it, Adam, but what we're witnessing in the world, there's a lot of darkness in the world right now. There's a lot of evil taking place. I think, for
yeah.
example, to mandate anyone to get an experimental vaccine, I think that was evil. To punish people into losing their careers, their jobs, to take away people's ability to earn money and put food on the table for their families on the penalty of not taking an experimental shot. I think that was an evil thing to do. I think anybody
Yeah.
that invested money prior to the pandemic, knowing what was coming, that was an evil thing to do. If Richie Sunak knew what was coming and he did that, he's going to pay a very terrible price at some point, because I do believe that everything that we do, everything that we say is recorded somewhere. And
Right.
there will be no escaping that judgment when it comes. And, whether you believe or you don't believe, it makes not the slightest bit of difference. You're going to find yourself in front of the judge at some future point. And I would rather be able to look back and say, well, okay, maybe I didn't succeed in doing this, or I didn't achieve but I tried, and I tried to do the best. And let's face it, sometimes people say Christians think they're do-gooders or that they're really good. Well, that's not my experience. You might get some people that sort of think that there's something better than anybody else, but most Christians will tell you, if they're real, they're not good people. They're just ordinary people that made lots of mistakes, the same as I have, the same as you have. But it's about trying to understand that the blood of Christ redeems us from that if we try to turn our lives around. And what you've done is a big step in getting baptized. That is a big step. And you talked about a book. I mean, I want to talk about that a little bit now as well, because what prompted you
Mhm.
to actually become an author and write that particular book?
I started writing it a few months after the death of George Floyd. So people understand I didn't have a public presence. I didn't even really use social media. I have Facebook for friends and family, but I barely used it. So I was a very private person. In many ways, I'm still kind of a private person today. Um, but it's one thing to choose to not say something. It's another thing to feel like you're not allowed to say something.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like. Even amongst a couple of my friends, asking very pertinent questions. Like I specifically remember one former friend now, where I asked, I've been alive for a long time, or a decent amount of time. I've never heard of 6 feet. What does that mean? And I feel really vindicated because I've talked to Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and Martin Kulldorff, and they both said, yeah, it's completely made up. It's not a thing. Like it was from like one, I can't remember the guy's name. It was like one like made up recommendation, right? And
Right.
talking to my friend, they were like, it's a scientific fact. Like they were just trying to like, duh, don't be stupid. This has always been a thing. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being gaslit by these people. We're telling me
Yeah.
this was always a thing. But nevertheless, it was that whole weird timeline where asking basic questions about very impactful things was like, how dare you ask why you should be locked into your home? How dare you ask, is every cop racist? Or is it just like maybe this one cop? Or
Yeah.
like, why should I even care about what's happening in this one city that I've never been to in my life? And why should I act emotionally scarred because of what happened to this one person?
Mhm.
Even if I agreed with all the narratives surrounding his
Mhm.
death, why do I need to be personally invested
Yeah.
in this guy because we share a similar complexion?
Mhm.
And that's what prompted me to actually seek out one to figure out, am I crazy? Like, am I the only one that feels this way? And when I started going to these different online communities, I found that I wasn't the only one that felt this way, that I
Yeah.
wasn't crazy. And when I was expressing myself, people would say, like, you should actually write more,
Yeah.
like, because how you explained yourself is really good. And so I was just like, I think this is the book idea that I've been wanting to write. So I just sat down and started writing. And even if we were to go back to religion and faith, or even I should just say God,
Mhm.
like there were times that I'm like, that wasn't all me. Like, to belt all this out and just to know, like instinctually, like this is what I want. I remember the day I figured out exactly how I wanted the book to look like. And that's how it came out. And it's like it's things like that. I'm like, man, there are things that are happening and I'm being guided
Yeah.
by something else.
I think that sometimes we find ourselves in strange circumstances, or we get compelled to do something. We don't
Yeah.
really know quite why. We just do it. We maybe just say, okay, I'll do it. Like I remember, I don't know if you know much about this, but I was in the Brexit party. I was a political activist, and I ended up becoming a parliamentary candidate down in London with the Brexit party after meeting Nigel Farage and doing awesome stuff down there. When I came out of that, the general election was at the end of 2019, and then the pandemic hit. And I'd come out of
Mhm.
a very, very busy sort of 6, 7 months, incredibly intense. And I kind of went back to the farm and I did put up new fences and did all sorts of things. And then I just was out with the dogs and I just felt I should get back onto social media. But the funny thing was, I had an X account, or a Twitter account as it was called back then. But I'd only started it in May in 2019 because I got told to do it. I wasn't ever really that fussed about social media, to be honest with you. I think at the height of it, I had about 2,200 followers. When I hopped
Mhm.
back on 3 years later, I still had about 1,800 followers on there. And I just felt I should really get back on and say something. And that's exactly what I did. And I got an instant response. People were saying, Jim, it's great to hear from you. Where have you been? Are you going to come back on and talk to us about what you're doing? And I sort of started to do that. And then I started to talk out
Mhm.
very strongly on the vaccine mandates and all that kind of stuff. And unbelievably, the channel exploded and it grew very, very fast. So now I'm doing a lot more of it because actually I quite enjoy it. But I never actually set out to do what I'm doing. And I find myself increasingly coming into contact with very interesting people like yourself, actually, just through mutual sort of associations or ideologies. And we, as I've said to you, we kind of got together because we were in a particular group that's fighting for freedom, that cares about what's going on in our world. And I saw you talking about your faith, and I thought, yeah, do you know what? I should talk to this fellow, and and that's kind of how it happened. So I don't think things happen by accident sometimes. I can't say with any great certainty that I was led to do that, or that but I think we know in our own hearts that sometimes there's something going on that you can't quite put the finger on. You just get that sense that you should be doing something, and sometimes it's good just to step out in faith, just go for it, and see where it leads. And you're absolutely right to do that. And I think people around the world need to be less worried about speaking up for their faith or their beliefs. I know that Christianity is under attack a lot. And, there's countries where it's a life-threatening experience if on a day-to-day basis, people don't realize the persecution that is going on with people of the Christian faith. So we live in a dark world, but as I often say to my viewers, as the world gets darker, we must get brighter. And I don't know about you, but I find that the fear goes. I mean, you're still aware of the threat, and you're still aware of the risk. I mean, a person I happened to meet on the steps of O'Connell Street in Ireland when we were speaking there, there was an assassination attempt on him, a guy called Malachi Steenson, just a few days ago. It was a political assassination attempt. You heard about the Slovakian Prime Minister and his shooting. So you never really know what's going to go on. But you have to live your life without being in fear. And I think going back to what you're talking about, the pandemic, I mean, there was a lot of fear, wasn't there? They controlled people through fear, didn't they?
For sure. A lot of scare tactics, manipulation that was happening. And I just listened to my instinct. I'm looking around me and everybody's, I don't know. Actually, I'll rewind a little bit because I think it's helpful for people to understand. For many years, I had social anxiety. And when you have social anxiety, or even sometimes general anxiety, you start to, and especially like depression, you stop listening to yourself. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust that what you're about to do is going to work, and you need to overthink it in preparation rather than just trusting your instinct. And when I was able to overcome that, especially through solo traveling, where you're forced to listen to your instincts because everything is new. And when I started living my life listening to my instinct, like everything changed. And I think instinct is like one of those like God-given abilities where it's something innate. Like we all have it. It's just a matter of if we listen to it, do we trust it, or do we deny it? And every time, very, very few times since, but every time I don't listen to my gut, like it's because it's something negative happens, or like the opposite of what I'm hoping will happens. And so like my gut is right. Like it's like it's like 99% of the time right. And when it came to this pandemic, my gut was saying this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I remember watching what was happening in Italy, and it became very clear that Italy was having some issues, but mainly because it's an older population. And this virus tends to really impact older and unhealthier people. So in my head, I'm like, okay, it's not the plague, but it's not exactly great for older people. So we should be able to mitigate that. But when China went full authoritarian, everybody just started going full authoritarian as if that's the only way to move forward. And I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense. We know who it affects. And when I see these people fighting to put a mask on a small, like a toddler, like I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. None of this makes sense. You can enter the restaurant, but must have your mask on. But as you're eating, you can pull the mask up and eat. Like it's just like none of this makes any sense. Like they
Yeah.
have cloth masks that they made at home, and that's supposed to stop the deadliest virus in the world. Like nothing made sense, and my gut was saying it didn't make any sense. But I'm really glad I listened to my instinct, especially because,
Mm,
at one point my son was asking me, like, he's in high school at that time, and he's asking me, he's like, should I be worried? And we had this
mhm,
conversation, and he was like, okay, that's what I thought. But, he
mhm.
was kind of like, he's seeing people around him acting real, like, wiping everything and just like super hypochondriac about this virus. And I was like, something about this doesn't make any sense to me.
When
So
I
I'm glad
saw
now, they're saying it.
I mean, I must admit, looking back, some of it is just ridiculous. I remember, though, watching Stephen Colbert, and I used to think he was quite a funny guy until he started pushing
Hmm.
the vaccine narrative, and I thought, oh, come on. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, great film, Terminator. Do you know what? I don't watch his films anymore because I disgusted what he said about people. You will go and get the vaccine, and I'm thinking, no, mate, that's not the right attitude. That's not the right thing to be saying, you know. And then again, there was all this lunacy, as you quite correctly said about the masks. But I mean, I think I remember seeing a lot of people saying, you'll get a free hamburger and a free lottery ticket and free taxi rides. And I'm going, wait a minute. Do you know what? This just doesn't make sense. And then in any case, I did study the 1918 pandemic flu and what had happened there and what actually happened because I was interested in it. And the kind of things that happened back then and what was happening now. No, it was quite clearly something that was orchestrated and manipulated, and there is evidence now, in particular in the United Kingdom, that we have a special division of our military, and you will have over in the States as well. I don't know what they call it, but in Britain it's called Brigade 77, and it's part of the British military, and they are a psyops brigade. They are sort of banks of computers, banks of bots. Back then when they had lots of bots on Twitter, I mean hundreds per operator. And what they were doing was they were targeting anybody that was speaking up, and people, journalists, investigative journalists, anybody in fact that said anything that went against this globalist narrative was attacked and shut down. And we saw what happened on Facebook. I remember joining this group, Adam, that had, I think probably 10 or 20,000 members. And they were posting images of rashes and like burn marks from vaccine injuries. Well, I joined it because I wanted to see what was going on. And
Hmm.
it got shut down very quickly. Zuckerberg, Facebook is one of the worst of the platforms for censoring people. Um,
Yeah.
there was clearly something that was not right. But I mean, in the United States right now, I'm starting to hear things coming out of Texas to say that H5N1 bird flu is now reportedly crossed the species barrier into cattle, that there's now 400 or 500 or 600 farm workers that are getting tested, probably with the PCR stuff. And we all know how inaccurate that is. But the concern is that you've got some, in my opinion, really evil people like Bill Gates, who seems to be pushing a particular narrative. And I don't know what your opinion is on this. My opinion is he's a pretty nefarious guy. And he's talked so many times about depopulation using vaccines. And he did say there's a video of him circulating at the moment, and it's been circulating for a few years now, where he and his wife at the time, Melinda Gates, were being interviewed, and they're sitting on this couch together. And he turns around and they look at each other with this very strange smile, saying, "Next time they'll take it seriously." How does he know there's going to be another pandemic? Well, there is a darker element to all of this, Adam, and I hate to think it, but there are some pretty bad people in this world. And if they've
Yeah.
done that, once again, my goodness, I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. They could have all the money and all the power and all the fame in the world, but there's going to come a point where it won't count for anything. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I would add that, in my opinion, what's the best way of putting this? I think that, so obviously we have the lab leak theory, coming out of China. Um, I personally think that it wasn't necessarily intentional, but I think that, and to me, like, it makes the most sense. Obviously, they were doing this particular study and manipulating this virus within within this lab in Wuhan, China. However, it makes sense to me that, I don't know, China isn't really a big fan of having regulations and sometimes is sloppy and do things a little bit half-ass, and they don't always have proper protocols. And this virus that they've been manipulating and you know, it just got out because they didn't do it right. And then what
Mm.
ended up happening is when there were like little things about there's like this weird virus and a doctor might say something, then suddenly disappear. They were trying to cover it up, right? But at that point, it started going around and became evident.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, it turned into what it's turned into. I think I can't speak for, let's say, Bill Gates and them. Um, but I think we started seeing from most of the politicians was not necessarily malicious intent, but just complete incompetence. Just
Mhm.
complete incompetence. Like, because if you think about it, the safe thing to do is probably to go to the extreme measure of being safe, right? So if we know there's some virus out there, okay, stay away from it, right? Well, what's the most extreme way? Telling people go. So they said
Yeah.
extreme safety. I care so much about you that I want you to be safe. So much
Mhm.
so that I'm going to lock up anybody who comes out. I'm going to go to the measure of doing it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they went to their fancy restaurants. They got caught doing this. They got caught doing that. Like
Yeah.
so many politicians across America got caught.
Mm.
And funny enough, the UK started opening up once Boris got caught.
Oh, I was just thinking of Boris as you were saying
Yeah,
that, and I was saying, "Oh yeah, it's all coming back now." Yeah, it was the
yeah.
whole thing was just a joke, wasn't it? But I
It
mean,
was a
we
complete
saw
joke.
it was a joke, but it was they manipulated a lot of things, and they didn't buy into they didn't obey their own rules, as it were, and I think that's what
Yeah.
caused the deep upset within our respective populations. We're approaching the last segment. This has gone past so fast, Adam. I'm going to have to get you back on it. Would you come back on with me again at some future point?
Yeah. Anytime.
Great. Well, look, before we go to the sort of the very final segment, I mean, you've got an election coming up in November. I don't can't remember the exact date, but around about
Yeah.
that time. What's your senses telling? What are you hearing on the streets? What are people talking about at the moment, and how do you think that might go down? Any thoughts?
So for quite some time, I was thinking that it is probable that Joe Biden will win. However, I'm starting to feel a little bit of a turn because I'm having more and more normal people and talking to other people who talk to normal people. When I say normal, people who aren't like us, who are constantly paying attention to politics, like they have a normal job and they pay attention to politics every so often.
Okay.
Um, More and more of these people are like, why are they going after Trump over
Mm,
this?
mm,
And they're like, that doesn't sound right. So there are more and more
mm.
people who are like that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that even if they believe that this is sham trials that are going on in Atlanta and New York, that he's going to get their vote. I think voter apathy is a really big concern, and I don't think
Right.
either party really understands that.
Mm,
Especially Republicans. The Republicans think that if the Democrats fail, it's automatically their win. And if what that can actually mean is that if Democrats fail, even from the perspective of someone who typically votes Democrat, they're just like, I'm out.
hmm.
And that's a really, really big concern. And everybody speculates, well, if they don't vote for Biden, is that a vote technically for Trump? Like, I don't think that should be our guessing game that we should play. We should try
Hmm.
to earn every vote that comes through.
Oh yeah, yeah, I
So,
agree. Yeah.
I'm hoping that, unfortunately, to be critical of Trump, I don't think Trump has given us much of anything as far as what he's going to do besides, I will fix it, trust me, you know, very vague stuff or harking back to 2016. But we have
Yeah,
2024 issues that we didn't have in
that's right.
2016. So
Yeah.
how are you going to fix this? So I think he could probably help to fill that gap if he was more policy driven and talked more. I know he likes to have these rallies and these big parties, but I've seen
Yeah.
him speak in person. It's one big show. That's he needs to have these debates, right?
Yeah.
He needs to have here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z, and this is why I'm going to do it. And Joe Biden's not going to do this. I think he needs more of that. He hasn't debated in the primaries. He didn't show up in Iowa. And
Mhm.
so like we really haven't heard much from him policy wise and in a prime time manner in
Do you
quite some
think
time.
it might be what are we, May, June, July, August, October? There's still quite a few months to go. Do you think he might be keeping his powder dry, not wanting to say too much in case the other team tries to copy it? Maybe.
No, I don't honestly, I think Trump is more of a vibe type person. However he's
Okay.
feeling, he's going to do. And there are definitely times that I know for sure that a typical political advisor would tell him not to do this thing, and he does
Mhm.
it. So I think he does whatever he feels like he wants to do.
Okay.
So he's not that's the thing. He's not afraid to talk. Matter of fact, he
No.
talks too much. The problem is that he's not talking about his
Right.
policy, like what he's like. They're not going to be super specific. No politician is
Okay.
really ever like that. But
Yeah.
give us something, give us some meat.
Mm.
Besides, I'll fix the economy, I'll stop the war. Like it's super vague. How would you do it?
Right.
Here's what I would
Fair play.
propose. Like give us
Okay.
something. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, we're coming up. This has been actually a really interesting interview for me. And apart from anything else, I love to hear about somebody that's seen the light, that's coming forward, stepping out in faith, doing all of that. I'm a huge supporter of that. So it's great to see you doing that. And but I would like to give you the same courtesy that I give to all of our guests for the last 2-3 minutes, to
Mhm.
please say whatever is on your heart to say, Adam. The floor is yours. On you go.
Uh, what is on my heart? I feel very blessed to be in this position that I wasn't asking for, but I'm glad to be here. I'm always thankful when someone wants me to come onto their platform to speak, especially from a perspective of I was a complete unknown not that long ago and didn't think anybody cared to hear what I thought. So to be able to have opportunities to write for major publications like the New York Post, which I have to finish an article as soon as we're done here. Um,
Right.
you know, who are like, for example, this article, they reached out to me and asked me to write something, right? Rather than me pitching it.
Mhm.
These type of things, and the longer I'm in the space, the more and more I realize like how what I'm doing is extremely difficult to do. What I'm doing is something that a lot of people want to do and aren't able to do it or have not accomplished it. And I feel very blessed to have the talent that I do have um, to be able to accomplish it. So I don't take anything for granted. Next week, no one could care about what I think, and that could be it. So I don't take any moment to be like expected tomorrow.
Well, there's a lot of humility there, and I have a funny feeling that you're going to go from strength to strength. I don't think the world's heard the last of Adam Coleman by a long shot, and I think you're doing a fantastic job, if I might say so. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to have you. Not at all. It's a pleasure to have you here with me on the show, and I actually really do look forward to you coming back on again. So I would just like to say a huge thank you, Adam, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Likewise, thank you for having me on.
And to all the people out there who are listening to this, I love the guests that come on here. We've got some really interesting people, and Adam is also one of those people. He's very calm, he's very measured, he's very respectful, he's very thoughtful. And it's always nice to see people taking that balanced, moderate view about a whole range of different issues that we've covered here this evening. So I would like to thank each and every one of you out there. And as I always like to say, you guys are the real stars of this show. And thank you for helping to share and spread the message that our wonderful guests like Adam Coleman come on and share with us. So once again, one and all, my sincere thanks to you. And thanks, Adam, once again. And I better let you go and get that New York Post article written up. I wouldn't want you to miss the deadline on that. So thank you once again, mate. This is Jim Ferguson We'll speak soon. Bye-bye for now.